lifelong resident of Brooklyn with its B and Q subway lines, and has a BA with high honors in English from Princeton University. She is working on her third novel. Her book, Pride, Prejudice, a novel of Mr. Darcy, Elizabeth Bennet, and the Forbidden Lovers, is up for a Lammy in the Bisexual Fiction category. Please welcome Anne.
You'll probably recognize my first line. I stole it. It is a truth universally acknowledged, Fitz said, that a single man in possession of a good fortune is in want of a wife. Charles blinked and sat up. Lord Fitz, it's the middle of the night. What do you expect me to make of that? Sounds like another of your epigrams. I suppose it is, Fitz said, but its meaning does not seem particularly obscure. You and Caroline going to tie the knot at last? You sly dog. Fitz grimaced and pulled Charles back down beside him. My dear, he said, you have a tendency to levity that, like any disproportion, can be tedious in excess. And you, Charles said, have a way of talking to people as if you were a judge and they the prisoner in the dock. Guilty as charged, Fitz said, bestowing a kiss on the pouting lips. My great-uncle might have been pleased at my following his example. Now, what shall my penalty be? I know. He trailed his hand down Charles's slender body until he found what he was looking for, held tight and squeezed. Charles groaned and arched his back. God, Fitz, you're a devil. I wish you'd... Don't talk, Fitz said. He moved lower in the bed, opened his mouth, and paid his forfeit with an alacrity bordering dangerously on enthusiasm. He would consider it deplorable if he were not motivated by love of the purest kind. That first ball in the Meryton Assembly lingered in Fitzwilliam Darcy's late-night torments for weeks. All the gentry for miles around attended, and worse, all the dreary, middling sort of people, the attorneys and the merchants, anyone who had acquired sufficient capital to retire from business or buy a tiny plot of land and could now call himself a gentleman. That in itself was bad enough, but naturally they all had families, and for some reason their progeny ran to daughters. At least that's how it looked to Fitz. My goodness, Caroline Bingley said, gliding up to take his arm. It's like a scene from some disreputable opera. For once, Fitz was in agreement and grateful for her protection. He could only be thankful that he had had the good sense to stay in town until the previous evening, and had not had the chance to be introduced to anyone. He could therefore claim to be unable to ask any of this enormous local harem to dance. Charles was already dangerously entangled with a plump, glowing girl, all smiles and lush curves, just the sort that would be considered the beauty of this benighted backwater. In London, of course, she'd be dismissed as a country milkmaid, but Charles conversed so spiritedly with her during the dance, and was on the verge of claiming her for an advised second set when Fitz attempted to intervene. Not dancing, Fitz, Charles said. How can you be so stupid? Fitz shrugged. You are dancing with the only handsome girl in the room other than your sisters. Oh, Miss Bennet is the most beautiful creature I ever beheld, Charles exclaimed, his voice unnecessarily loud over the thin strains of music from the small orchestra. But there's her sister forced to sit down, and almost as pretty. Why not ask her? Despite his best efforts, Fitz couldn't help sliding his eyes in the direction of the seated girl, curious as to how the sister of a country beauty would appear. Buck-teeth, perhaps, or giggler, or spotty. And by the worst of bad luck, his eyes met hers, as sensing his covert scrutiny, she turned her head toward his side of the room. Wide, dark brown eyes, fringed with delicate lashes, expressive, humorous eyes, yet earnest. Lively but honest, gentle and innocent as a doze, but with the wit of a philosopher, playful and seductive as a kitten, but with humanity and Christian grace to temper any impropriety. Fitz felt himself blushing like a schoolboy, frowned and looked away. By God, he would not be made a fool of. I'm afraid she is not handsome enough to tempt me, he said, ashamed of the words as soon as they left his mouth. You had much better return to your charming partner and leave me to my uncharitable solitude. He watched Charles follow his advice, annoyed at being obeyed so promptly. and became aware of Caroline standing nearby, apparently having witnessed the entire disgraceful incident. "Miss Bingley," Fitz said, giving a slight bow and attempting a smile, "will you do me the honor?" "Why, Mr. Darcy," she said, "I worried for one breathless moment that Cupid's arrow had pierced your heart." "What the whatever are you talking about?" Fitz said. "But then I recalled," Caroline continued, "that you do not possess a heart to be wounded." Fitz was grinding his teeth as he led her out to form the quadrille. That's it. That's it. I have nobody to introduce, but thank everybody here for, and thank Bluestockings for letting us all read. It's a great pleasure.
On behalf